feels to you like you don't know what to do, and since you don't know what to do, it's hard to turn something that has so much momentum around, and yet it isn't hard to change the momentum of something if you can change the thought of something, and yet it's hard to change the thought of something when you have so much more to observe. That's why we like to say that from wherever you are to wherever you want to be, it's an emotional journey. The journey is a complicated journey. It feels like it's not an easy journey. It feels like it's a journey that most people don't accomplish with ease. It's a challenging journey. And we agree it appears to be that way when you're thinking in terms of the action part of it. But it really is a simpler journey if you try to make it the emotional journey that we've been describing here. Now, the reason that we want to say this to you, and even though it must be irritating to someone who has some very specific physical things they want to achieve, to hear some dead person who doesn't even have a rent to pay to harp on and on and on about it being an emotional journey, like emotion is all Abraham's really got, you know. We are all about thought and feeling, and we are not much about action at all, because there is not anything action for us to manipulate from our non-physical, non-place, non-thing point of view. But we want to get your attention about that, because if you realize that every illness, no matter what it is, no matter what label it is, it's always about resistance. And resistance is always about contradicted thought. It's always about wanting one thing but thinking another. It's always about summoning energy and then offering thought that contradicts the energy that you're summoning. So once an illness manifests, and even before it is diagnosed, once there is physical symptom of it, now not only is it harder because now you've got this now circumstance that you're wanting to not pay attention to, even though it's drumming very loudly in your experience, but you still haven't dealt with whatever resistance caused that to begin with. And so recovering from illness is not only about ignoring the manifestation of the vibrational variance, but it's about still getting to the bottom of the vibrational variance. The difference in the emotional journey and the physical journey is that you really don't have to get to the bottom of anything. You just have to monkey around with thoughts until you find one that feels good, and that's the way you deal with the variance in vibration. So we know that it would be easier for you to feel happy if you could get back on the tennis court, or if you could continue to run again. In other words, all of those things that you said you want, we know that if someone could snap their fingers and make it so, that you would have a momentary surge of appreciation and joy. But even if all of that were to happen, it would not necessarily change the vibrational patterns that brought it about to begin with. And so that's why we want to sort of shower you with our awareness that you are blessed and you deserve for it to go that way. And we are in complete agreement with you that all of these things that you're asking for should be yours, but we can't give them to you, nor can anybody else give them to you, because it is and always has been an inside job. So then you say, all right, well, I'm up for this. My experience has catapulted my desire into a whole new level of desire. I want with clarity that I have never wanted before. And now I am willing to do whatever it takes to take my emotional journey. And what we want you to hear from us is that it will take far less than you ever have been asked to give for anything. Far less on this emotional journey than anything that it would take far less than getting your body into a position that you could win a tennis match. It would take far less than getting your body into a position that you could run unfettered for a period of time. It would take far less than what you have done many times. You just got to get pointed in the right direction at what it does take, you see. So we would not ask you to give up all of your cynicism all at once, because no one could do that. We would not ask you to give up all of your pessimism all at once. No one, or your realism all at once. No one could do that. We're just asking you, when you have time and when you feel like it, to try to find thoughts that feel better than the thoughts that come most easily. And it is our promise to you that as you release the resistance, your well-being has to return. And it will return in much swifter fashion than it left. And it will return with much greater stamina than you have ever known, because your desire is at a new level of asking that you were not at before. Does that make sense to you? So people ask us the question, what should I do? And we say, just find something to feel good about. And they say, no, really, what should I do? And we say, just find something to appreciate and just beat the drum of that. And they say, no, really, Abraham, what should I do? And we say, really, that is it. And they say, well, that sounds too simple. And we say, well, then just try it for a little while. In other words, if it sounds simple, you're in a very good place. If it sounds complicated, then you'll have to work on it a little bit. But it really is as simple as just finding something to feel good about and insisting that you do. Now, what that sometimes requires is a change of pace, maybe spending more time with people that you haven't spent time with and less time with some people that you have spent time with. It requires reading different things and thinking different thoughts, taking walks in new places. It requires a new regiment, just like any improvement requires a new regiment. It requires wanting so much to feel good that you're going to train yourself into this place of feeling good. But as we've been saying all day here today, you can't do it all at once. So what you're really wanting to do is just reach for a thought that feels a little better than the thought that you've been thinking consistently. So something that feels a little more optimistic, not to others' ears, but feels a little more optimistic to you while you speak it. In other words, we would like to hear you soothe you relative to this. Sometimes people step from resistant to less resistance to resistance to less resistance to resistance to less resistance to resistance to less resistance. They will go from disappointment to anger to disappointment to fear to disappointment to rage to disappointment. In other words, but when you begin making progress and you know you've made progress and you acknowledge that you've made progress, now you can keep moving in that direction. And so the thing about the emotional journey is that if you will pay attention to the way you feel, you can always feel when you're headed in the right direction. In other words, you can feel when you're making the worst of something, and you can feel when you're making the best of something. So make the best of it here, and we'll listen in. And what you're going to be paying attention to is, I'm looking for incremental feelings of relief. If you try to jump too far, nothing happens. Incremental feelings of relief. So you're just wanting to reach as far as you can reach. Joseph Campbell says, follow your bliss. And we say, those are the best words we've ever heard, except that you can't find bliss from where you are. So if your goal is to follow something that you can't even get a whiff of, then you're lost in the desert, you see. Where if you're just reaching for something that feels a little better, and you do acknowledge that it does emotionally feel a little better, and you stop and say, this does feel better than where I was, now you're off and running. What's confusing is that you think that what we're saying is you've got to go from your cynical outlook or from your disappointment to bliss or joy. And we think after listening to us here today, you realize we're not asking you to make that jump. We're just asking you to make any jump. Now, we want to talk to you about something, just to soothe something that is the basis of all of this. I want to suggest you were hearing us clearly as we have been talking about how a person in a place of despair or true depression cannot quantum leap into joy and ecstasy. It's too big of a vibrational jump. And maybe the only vibration that they have access to is one of rage or revenge. So they go from their feeling of absolute loss of freedom, where they can hardly even get a breath of air, into a life-giving, freer breathing space of rage or revenge. Now, if someone like us or like you were standing nearby and seeing them do that and could point out to them, see how much better you feel in this vengeful thought than you did in that powerless thought. Good for you. You've made progress. You're pointed in the right direction. Now hold your place here for a little bit and beat the drum of it until you're stable in your feeling of rage and revenge, where you're not likely to slip back into those feelings of despair and powerlessness. Then from that place, you could reach into anger and eventually into overwhelmment and frustration and eventually into the life that you want and deserve. In other words, we have to feel grateful that at least they have found the relief of revenge. We have to celebrate the relief that they're finding and not despair over the actions that are born out of that, but instead be grateful that the individual has found some relief as they are beginning to regain their power. And little by little, things come back into balance. You know, things are so much more imbalanced than you believe that they are. When you look at the whole of things, there is so much more that is going well than is not going well. The not well-being is such a small percentage of what's being lived. It is so small and so insignificant. But as a teacher, we know what happens to you. You want so much for everyone to discover the joy that you are discovering that it becomes unbearable for you to look at those who are not. But you have to understand, some of them, you have to put it into perspective with where they come from. Do you know? Some of those that are in the grips of war are feeling better than they have felt in years. It's about focusing. It's about regaining one's sense of power. It's about saying that what I think matters. And so, in the same way that if you had two little children and they were arguing and fighting with each other, you should not intervene and interfere. You should let them find their place. And you should hope that they both come into their own power. And you should hope that they become viable proponents and opponents of each other. You should hope that they learn from each other and that their individual resolves be strengthened by their interaction with each other. And you should never hope that they become one. Because that's like saying, let's take all of these ideas that exist and let's whittle them down to just a few good ideas. Let's shrink this expanding universe. Let's shrink it. You cannot do it. It is ever expanding. So when you accept that it is expanding and you accept that it is variety and dissonance and difference that causes it to expand, and then you choose from among the buffet those things that are in alignment with your desire, and you focus upon those things that you desire and the universe gives them to you, while that one focuses upon the thing that he desires and the universe gives it to him, and you realize there is no shortage, that everybody can have everything that they want, and that the only thing that ever keeps anybody from getting what they want is that they're pushing very hard against what the other guy is doing. And we know that's the point you came to. That's what you were trying to explain. But they can't hear that because you're up here reaching for ecstasy from frustration, and they're down there trying to live. They're trying to get a breath of life, you see. It's too big of a jump for most of them. It is our wish that you could ease up, be less demanding of yourself, work on that worthy thing. Write lists of things that you adore about yourself and others, and practice the art of appreciation. And in doing so, you will put yourself more consistently in vibrational alignment with the well-being that it is our promise to you is being held, not from you, but for you, in non-physical and physical escrow. You deserve these things that you've been asking for, but you've got to stop worrying about them not being there in order to let them in. There is great love here for you. We are complete.